So to my right, I think you recognize George Westinghouse, aka Michael Shannon, but you probably don't yet know visually the director, Alfonso Gomez-Rejon. My first question is quite simply the origin of this film, because I would love to know more about how this project came to you and whether you thought it was a giant leap to take on this kind of epic scale after the intimacy of the film Me and Earl and the Dying Girl that I told the audience about beforehand.
How I got involved in the screenplay with the screenplay isn't a very interesting story. It was I was working on a couple of films after Me and Earl that I was thinking of making next, and they weren't really coming together. And I wanted to start reading material that was out there, and this script had recently made the Blacklist in LA, which are some of the hottest scripts of the year or whatever.
The hottest scripts that have not been made.
And at first I read it and I didn't think, I mean, I liked it, but I wasn't very interested in electricity. It wasn't who I was, which makes perfect sense now. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, and there were all these other layers in the film about ego versus humility, and how far a man would go to be remembered, and how much of Edison was in me and how much of me was Westinghouse. And I think there was some themes that now, with a little distance from the film and some time, I can see that there was a lot of themes I was still playing with and thinking about and working through that had started with Earl. And there's so much grief and so much denial and so much death in the movie, and Edison really trying to defy nature and throughout the entire film, and I can see how that and bigger themes of legacy were at some point I couldn't shake any of that. And then as a filmmaker, to make a period piece, but then deconstruct it and make it contemporary, because it was a movie about the future, not about the past. And at some point, it just felt like I just knew that I needed to tell this story.
Okay. And I gather, by the way, the script was by Michael Mitnick.
Yes.
And he wrote it when he went to Yale Drama School at the very beginning of his studies as an exercise. And if I understand correctly, they first tried this as a stage musical in 2008.
I've listened to some of the tracks. Michael played them for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't really imagine it, I'm sorry. But I do understand how it might become a motion picture, because as I suggested to the audience, it informs how motion pictures really started to come into being.
And the style of the film was always going to reflect, embrace the medium that was being invented concurrently with electricity.
Exactly.
It was always going to be My Bridge references. Those are my little secrets, you know.
That was not in the script?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for Michael Shannon, I'm interested, you know, you probably get offered a lot of parts. I know you take quite a few of them. You're with 80 films that have been done so far. What was it about playing George Westinghouse that attracted you? And how did you conceive of the way that you'd play his character, although I know much of that comes from the director too?
Well, Alfonso courted me. He came out to Red Hook, where I was living at the time in Brooklyn, and we met at my local spot. And he, I believe when we met, at the beginning of the meeting, I told you there was no way in hell I was ever going to do this movie, right?
It was a hard no.
Yeah, it was like, I
tried to make
wanted you to buy me lunch.
Bloody Marys.
And then you said, well, I have something for you. And you took out this little cardboard box about this thin, about this high. And I opened it up, and there was this very slim volume, dark navy blue, leather bound, and just in little gold letters across the front, it said George Westinghouse. And I said, what is this? And you said, well, you know, there's not much about him, because he was very, he was not after the limelight. He was not after being deified in any way. He just was very private, and actually, I believe, destroyed a lot of his papers before he died, so that nobody would know much about him. But this little book had been written by his workers, his friends, people, and it was basically a memoriam to him, and kind of in a way, eulogizing him and talking about what a great man he was. And I read that, and I thought, well, you don't get an opportunity to play someone like this very often. So, and it's hard to say. I'm not saying he was a saint or anything, but it seems like he conducted himself in a very ethical, humane way, particularly considering that he was one of the wealthiest Americans at the time. And I thought, well, it would be a good role model to present right now, considering that most people who make a lot of money right now seem to do it on the backs of other people, and he seemed to find a way not to do that. So I just wanted to put that forward and hope that maybe somebody paid attention.
But I think that there's a coherence between what I'm gathering is your approach to acting, which is not showy. I mean, in this film, obviously, Thomas Edison is the showman, and he's very good at it. And Westinghouse has no particular interest in branding things and having his name all over the place. He wants to do something towards the future. And my guess is that as an actor, you're not showy.
Well, I'm not really comfortable with that. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly acting is and what it means to be an actor. I'm not kidding. I think about it all the time. I watch other people do it, and I think, wow, what a phenomenally awkward and bizarre thing that is to act. I'm not even sure why human beings care about it at all. But it's like why you watch people pretend to do things. It's just so fascinating.
I need it. I mean, I go to the theater constantly. I just can't believe that humans are capable of doing that.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Well, I think the one thing I've been able to come up with is that I think it's very healthy to because the thing about life is it just goes by too quickly, and you're not able. Things happen, and it's kind of like slipping off the monkey bars. You just can't keep up there, and with acting, you're able to slow time down and really contemplate and meditate on why people do certain things and why they behave the way they behave, and that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, for a filmmaker, I think it's an extension of my imagination. It's everything I can't do and I'm feeling and want to go through and give a shape to, and I can't do.
Well, it seems to me that you're getting at questions that have to do with, why do we tell stories? Why do we make art? Well, it's not that anybody, I think, gets up and wants to act. It's that you want to be part of something that tells the kind of a story that either illuminates something or enhances our lives. And if you do it well, you don't necessarily call attention to yourself, Academy Awards notwithstanding. You do it because you believe in the story you're telling. And one of the reasons I find tonight's film so compelling is that on the one hand, it tells a fascinating tale about which, frankly, I knew very little. I may teach film history at Columbia, but I don't know too much about history, just movies. And every piece of this film, acting included, coheres into this large and very beautifully wrought object. But secondarily, I happen to love movies that have a gentle self-consciousness about them, that remind us that we're watching a film. In other words, they almost make you aware of the seams while not detracting from the story. But for example, the flickering train. We see that at the beginning when the train of Edison does not stop to meet with Westinghouse. And then that flickering returns at least twice more. And I can't help being aware, oh, this is how movies started. This is the basis of motion. And I suspected that whatever was in Mitnick's script, you, because you love film and making film, you turned this also into a story about making movies. Would that be correct?
It is correct, yes. And the window outside of the train was like a zoetrope, and it replays and replays, and the sound effect replays and evolves, and it eventually becomes the image that the boy sees in the kinetoscope. And Edison yet again has defied nature and kept his wife alive again.
Yes.
And it's one of the values of the movie, I think, is it highlights and draws attention to things that we so take for granted nowadays. things like the movies or electricity, things that we just assume are at our fingertips. You know, seeing these people actually forging this culture that we live in right now, and you know, the origins of, and we see it at such a heightened scale now when you look at what's happening with the, you know, the internet and social media and whatnot. But even in this film, you hear Tesla say, "We don't need the wires." You know, it's all the kernels, all the genesis of what we're dealing with right now is in this story. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, one of the things that I find so compelling about the film is the acknowledgement that scientific progress was not only about lifting and constructing and making lives better, there was always the component for destruction. In other words, the electric chair, you spend almost as much time, you bring it cross-cutting into the World's Fair, forcing us to acknowledge that with every great step forward technologically, there is the capacity for destruction and violence. Was that also in the script, or is this part of a cautionary?
Sorry. I think it was definitely Michael and I spoke a lot about the death penalty and the electric chair and how to best use the sequence of William Kemmler and juxtapose it with the lighting at the World's Fair. But it is something that I've continued to think about more and more, even during post, and so some things are subconscious and you're feeling them and articulating them through images or through performances, and later the left side of your brain starts to process a little more. But it's something that I you know, with technology and culture have been tied together, and we always adapt, whether it's the light bulb or the birth control pill or the flushing toilet. We tend to adapt, but there's a sense of things moving so fast now that I worry that we won't be able to adapt. You know, Facebook didn't exist 15 years ago, and now it's waiting an election. What's going to happen in 5 years? But something that's been on my mind quite a bit, more so, and because of making this film has I've posed questions that I too am trying to answer. But so the kernel of that was in the script, and it continues to evolve during the filmmaking and post.
And I'm curious about the casting. You know, what drew you to Michael Shannon? I'm guessing that one of the reasons you might have thought of Benedict Cumberbatch is that he was so brilliant in The Imitation Game as Alan Turing, incarnating someone totally lacking in social graces, and that, you know, that kind of diffidence, a sort of inability to make yourself sympathetic was in that character, and some of that is in Edison. So was that in your mind at all, and what led you to Michael Shannon?
What led me to Michael Shannon was my first meeting with casting director Ellen Lewis, who's a great casting director, and she said, "I got it. This is a great rock and roll couple. Michael Shannon, Catherine Waterston." I said, "Yes." That was then the journey became to try to court him over Bloody Marys. But then, but that was very easy, and not the courtship, but maybe it was, right. And then Benedict was already attached to the script when I became involved. So we had a series of Skypes, and we saw the same film, and that's important because if we didn't see the same film, then it wouldn't have worked out. And he was open to really kind of developing and really working on and not being afraid of that dark side of Edison, and which I thought was key.
Yes, and I don't want to leave out Nicholas Hoult, because this is an actor, you almost don't realize that you've seen the same actor in X-Men, The Favorite, Tolkien. I just saw him in an upcoming film called The Banker, playing a very American character, Mad Max Fury Road. And you know, he began as a child. He was the child in About a Boy with Hugh Grant. So you chose him for Tesla, yes, the Serbian genius immigrant.
We had, basically I had in my office mood boards that any department could come into the office.
Yeah,
mood, like a gallery of images, and they were all basically David Bailey photographs, rock and roll photography, Pennebaker Maisels, and it was Dylan and Jagger, and it was Bowie. Tesla, and we weren't trying to replicate the past exactly, but interpret it and make it feel, maybe get close to what it might have felt like, and then when Nick Holt was interested, we had lunch, and he was just perfect, and he knew a lot about Tesla already, and he just had these very incredibly powerful eyes and a presence to him, and he just gave himself over to the role. And the casting was actually a very beautiful process. Not a lot of drama in putting the cast together. It was.
I'm going to start this question with Michael Shannon because you do a lot of theater work in addition to film. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Because when I think about this movie, there seem to be so many technical aspects that need to be calibrated and orchestrated for the vision to come together. Was there time for rehearsal, for example? Was the direction of actors, was that as much of a primary aspect of this? And you've worked.
The direction was brilliant, wasn't it, Michael? Sorry.
No, it never felt hurried to me. It never felt like we were rushing, and Alfonso, a lot of times the way he covered things, there wasn't too much coverage, so it really felt like doing a scene. Some of the scenes are in one shot, two shots. He really encouraged, whether it was Catherine and I or whether it was Nick and I, to explore things. There were some more technical aspects. I think one of the first things I shot was green screen.
Oh right, yeah, it's not in the film.
My first day was like riding on a
it didn't make
through my factory. With Pope.
With Pope, yes.
Yeah, who was lovely. And that was a weird day.
That was a weird day. It was green screen. It's weird.
Yeah. What were we actually standing on?
We were standing. It was supposed to be. We found this footage of Wabco online.
Westinghouse's factory. Yeah.
And we designed a lot of those interior CG shots based on that footage. And there were little trains, little trolleys that would move people.
Because it was so massive.
And so we built one trolley, and there was going to be this scene between him and Pope as they go through the entire Wabco. For a scene that eventually we ended up cutting, but it was the first scene. It was a light scene. It was kind of funny because they keep talking to each other and they can't hear what the other person's saying.
Oh, because it's so loud.
But tonally it was just a little off. But it was funny on the page, but it just didn't work. But but that was our first. That's how
we didn't have a rehearsal period before we started shooting, really.
No, because there were two movies, Edison's and Westinghouse's, and I think Edison.
Yeah, you actually they kind of shot all the Edison stuff first, and then I showed up with Catherine and we started doing the Westinghouse part of it.
Yeah, Benedict and I had a little more rehearsal because we were prepping in London, and we went through the script together. And then once that finished, I think we had a day, we rehearsed a little at the house, we had a nice dinner, we talked about it, and then just got to work.
Sure.
Because I was coming straight from something else.
That 12, that's 12.
You just mentioned that first scene that you shot didn't make it into the film. And it leads me to the larger question, because the first incarnation of this movie was in 2017 when it was going to be a Weinstein Company release, and it showed at the Toronto Film Festival, and suddenly the Weinstein Company was no longer in existence. This is called the director's cut, and I know that it is considerably reshaped. I haven't seen the first version, but obviously there are quite a few differences, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the process of redoing the film. Most directors don't get a chance to do a director's cut before the film opens. It usually happens for the DVD, whatever, but you've had that opportunity.
I did. It was a very chaotic time for a while. Then the silence afterwards is equally as terrifying, not knowing if your film is going to be released or which version. So when we got the call that I got my footage back, I had been recutting the movie in my head for a year, basically, and I think the silence and the distance was a blessing, and I was able to, at least in my head, go back to the original movie that I intended to make, tonally, really. And so what happened is the scenes when we screened at TIFF, it was still very much a work in progress. The movie, we were still finding the shape of the film and shaping the performances, and I think it really. We really had to
technology.
Yeah, so it's about shaping the performances and finding the tension between Edison and Westinghouse. And that we hadn't really nailed that yet. And we shot 5 new scenes, but the film is still 10 minutes shorter, to give you a sense of how much we had to reshape the film, and then rescored it as well. So the whole overall experience is
So
very
this is a new score.
completely different score.
Yeah, I looked it up. Danny Bensi and Sonder Durian.
Yeah.
This has a really propulsive
Yeah.
track. The way that from the very beginning, the technology inventiveness is matched in a way by the sound pushing us.
It was always meant to be a character in the film. In fact, in my first meeting with the studio, I made it a point to say that if I were to make this movie, it wasn't going to be a still, stodgy period movie, because it was about the future, it was about innovation. I wanted it to feel current, I wanted it to feel relevant, but I didn't need it to be aggressive, and I approached it like a concert film. And music was always going to be a character in it. And I think I love what they do with technology, and you hear the gadgets and the pieces of the equipment, along with some beautiful contemporary sounds, and then beautiful cellos and strings. And I think they just created something that really is the spirit of the film and what I wanted it to be all along. So it took a while to get there, but once we got there, everything just fell in sync.
And did you oversee this new version on your own? Did you bring in other editors? Did the actors have anything to do with it?
No, I think I have to say that the cast has been incredibly respectful and supportive throughout this sometimes very tough time, and that means everything to me. So when we needed to go back in there and shoot a few new scenes, everyone came together for that one Saturday, and in a farmhouse outside of London. So there was a moment there when a new editor, my original editor, who's in the room now, and David Trachtenberg, did such a beautiful job with the film. When I shot the new scenes, he was working on another job, so another editor helped me shape those scenes and plug them in. And then David came back and we finished it together. And it's funny, I called him at one point in London and I said, I think if we took this out, and he's like, I haven't stopped thinking about it too. So I wasn't the only crazy one. He hadn't stopped thinking about the film either. And just it was released, it was screened before it was ready, and then judged, and then it was. Then it was all the chaos and all the opinions and all that, and you lose a lot of leverage as a filmmaker. So getting all of that back and the power back and was very important to me, especially that one scene, the new scene that we shot of Tesla being fired by Womack. That was really me trying to. I'm feeling like that's exactly what I felt like. You're stripped of your voice. You will die a dreamer. And you're just an immigrant, and so that was a key scene for me, and it only makes the movie even more personal.
Okay. That I understand. Michael, you have worked with so many directors. I remember the very first time I ever saw you on screen. It was actually a Werner Herzog film, My Son, What Have You Done? Rather strange. And then Revolutionary Road, Sam Mendes. But I started looking, my former student and colleague, Ramin Barani, you worked with not only in 99 Homes, which I think is one of the most brilliant films about the financial crisis and eviction that I've ever seen, and also Fahrenheit 451, a remake of the Truffaut film that was aired last year by HBO, where your steely exterior of a very complex character I thought was terrifically moving. But also Jeff Nichols, Take Shelter, Loving, Midnight Special, and Guillermo del Toro's Shape of Water, and Tom Ford, Nocturnal Animals, Liza Johnson, Elvis and Nixon. Could you talk a little about how it's different to be directed by Alfonso, or is there a similarity that all of these wonderful filmmakers have in the way that they allow you to do your best work?
Well, to me, it's kind of like let's say you're a tourist here in Manhattan and you're walking around and you're lost, and you see somebody and you think, well, I think they know what's happening. I'm gonna go ask them. And sometimes you go up to the person and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then sometimes you go up and they're like, yeah, I think it's over there. And it's kind of like that, really. You're just trying to find something, and you're not quite sure how to find it. And all great directors have a lot in common. I think they're all incredibly prepared. They're all very tough people. They stick to their guns. They don't surrender, but they're also very empathetic, and they know that the best way to get what you want from other people is to treat them with respect and to listen to them. And these are all qualities that Alfonso has in spades. And they all have a vision that's unique to them. And visions are hard things to put into words, But I think Alfonso has been very eloquent tonight about his vision for this material. He approached it in a way that is completely unlike how anyone else would have approached it, from a completely different angle. And he's incredibly creative and intuitive and intelligent. But yeah, it's hard to put into words what makes each individual artist special. But I just know that I felt really, initially I felt like I was in over my head, and Alfonso made me feel comfortable and relaxed, and that's really the biggest gift a director can give an actor, is to, it's like when I was doing Elvis and Nixon with Liza, the first day when we were shooting, we were starting with this stuff in the Oval Office with Kevin Spacey, who was playing Nixon, and I was sitting there and I was supposed to be like power playing him or something, and we did 3 or 4 takes, and Liza came up to me and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, just relax. I'm like, well, what am I doing something wrong? She's like, no, you just seem scared. Just relax. Just have a good time. I'm like, okay. That's one of the best pieces of direction I've ever received. It's not. It is and it isn't brain surgery.
Also, I think very often in movies, I can almost feel that either the actor or the director is trying to make me like the character. In other words, you're going for sympathy. And one of the things about this film is neither Benedict Cumberbatch's Edison nor your Westinghouse is trying to be sympathetic within the film or as actors to us.
Well, that was a great thing. Alfonso kept imparting. I think the common cause that we both came up with is just to see Westinghouse's wonder about all of this. I mean, here's a man who's phenomenally successful, phenomenally intelligent, knowledgeable, and yet he still has this sense of wonder about what's happening around him, and that if we could capture that, then that would be mission accomplished in a way. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite moments in the film is the last scene between the Edison and Westinghouse at the Chinese Pavilion, or the Chinoiserie Pavilion. And just the look of wonder in his eyes looking at Edison, and just, how did you figure it out? You know, it's just such a simple moment. After everything that's happened, he's still in awe of this man. There's still a little of him that he just can't quite figure out. And I love that moment. There's a very childlike wonder in his eyes.
Yeah, I love that moment for a completely different reason. I'm going, why the calligraphy? Why this woman? And what is she writing?
Spring Will Come Again is what she's writing.
Say it again.
Spring Will Come Again. And we also use Max Richter score, a cue. We licensed 2 Richter pieces of Max Richter. One of them is Spring, which is Vivaldi deconstructed. And I just love the simplicity of that art form, as opposed to, you know, these inventions and the 2 sides to and the consequences of new ideas. You get the light bulb and the electric chair, and you have social media and loneliness as a byproduct, even though it's meant to connect us. And I just love going back to the simplicity of just a brush and some ink.
Yeah. That's what I felt as well, and
Yeah.
I appreciated that it's yet another image in the film about recording,
Yeah.
about making your mark, but hers was primitive or timeless.
Yeah, it's ancient. It's like seeing this, the fact that it's so old, and here we are in the World's Fair and this advent of all these new discoveries, and yet something that is so old and so, in a way, so simple can be as beguiling as anything. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's your character who says at one point, there is always more to see. Mm-hmm. And I take that as one of the key lines in the film, because it's true within the movie, and it's true for us as an audience. On a second viewing, I could sense how much more there was to see than the first time. And I was wondering, Alfonso, do you deep down identify a little bit more with Edison than with Westinghouse, despite the character flaws, because he was the inventor of motion pictures, which is your very art form?
I think no to both, but there's the man that I'd like to be, which is Westinghouse, and it reminds me very much of the qualities of my father and my mother, who's here tonight, and just a very ethical approach to life, and Edison, the ambition is there, you know, and the idea as filmmakers, we make things that you hope will last. Inventions are solutions that hopefully will last, and that equals to success. Now, how much of that does your work? Do you want your work to be remembered along with your name, or how much can your work change the world or change some minds just a little bit? And that's where there's some tension there. I love Westinghouse is not only a brilliant inventor, but he's a genius at contextualizing inventions. And Edison can come up with something like a true miracle and trap light in a jar or a sound in a box, and all of a sudden the demand follows. You know, and I loved how Westinghouse. You know, Edison might have thought of him as an improver, not an inventor, but I think his genius was in how he was able to make the world a better place and save lives with things like the air brake.
Sure.
So I think there's a little of both, and maybe a little more of one than there should be.
And then there's Tesla. I don't want to leave him out of the equation, because you bring him in as a vital third party, an intermediary figure, who, of course, in some way, his name comes up more often in contemporary parlance than Edison or Westinghouse. The Tesla car, I mean, the notion that, and you identify him as futurist, which was a term that I found rather evocative. It wasn't scientist or...
Yeah, it was a play. You know, I could describe everyone as an inventor. That wasn't going to be very fun. So Thomas Edison gets that, industrialist and futurist. I just thought that, you know, there's so much about the movie about communication also, with the way when Edison and his sons are grieving Mary and they communicate through Morse code, and the beautiful flow and intimacy that in Westinghouse and Marguerite, and that true partnership. and Tesla, who's trapped in his head and can't communicate his ideas because he's seeing 100 years into the future. So I think futurist was a good term for him.
Yeah. I also was wondering, maybe first for Michael and then for Alfonso, whether there's a bit of contemporary relevance, because obviously we're talking about this as a film that goes back to the past, but to illuminate what was very futuristic about that time. Since so much of our current moment seems to be about getting one's narrative out there. In other words, getting your version, your story, and certainly Westinghouse is caught up in that. When you were making the film, was there any sense of that? Or maybe it was too early, you were making this probably, well, in 2016.
No, we started shooting 2017.
Okay.
I think we shot a couple of days around December. But there's a little of these are the original disruptors, and it gets more, it feels more relevant as maybe the time was a good thing for this film, because you have the Bezos and Musk and Branson racing to the moon. I'm not sure for what. Are they trying to colonize? What, to be the first to do what exactly in Mars? But there is a sense of the way we're looking at films now, and content and streaming services, and how one company's buying the other, and now there's another. We finished this film in a movie theater, and I'm not sure. I hope they last forever, but there is a sense that things are changing quite fast. But I think there was a little bit at first, and then then things accidentally, like the fence metaphor, always meant something to me, and over the years it means so much more now, and it packs a bigger personal kind of punch. Both the literal fence that Mary is talking about, and the virtual one that Edison and Westinghouse speak of at the end.
And actually, it's Westinghouse who tells Edison in that World's Fair scene, about what a fence can do or should not be doing. And I think that was a very eloquent way to phrase the past as well as the present.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said earlier, it's just, there's a tremendous responsibility attached to all this, and in terms of invention and progress and technology, and it's everything is very precarious. It needs to be, a lot of thought and consideration needs to be put into all of it. When you see Zuckerberg the other day saying, "Oh no, I'm not gonna police Facebook. I'm not gonna do this or that." I'm like, oh, all right. Oh well.
And there's something also timeless but current in the scene that you added to the film, when the guy who's firing Tesla says something like, "It's not currents, it's currency." In other words, money is what fuels everything. It reminded me of a line in one of my favorite films of all time, Philip Kaufman's The Right Stuff, where the astronauts who are going up the Mercury 7, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. And there's an awareness that's built in that scene.
Yeah, there is. It's the struggle of every filmmaker, and this art and commerce are always battling each other. And I do think of these men as artists, and just the joy of making things. Unfortunately, it's not when you want to make a film, or you want to, like architecture and invention, you need a lot of money, a lot of people, and so it's you wish maybe you could just dance or just paint, and I think they're trapped with ideas in their heads that need the resources, and at that point in time, Edison was not only winning, but he was famous.
Yeah. I couldn't help but notice that among the producers are rather well-known names like Martin Scorsese and Steven Zaillian. Did they have much input in terms of the way you made the film?
I think Zaillian's input happened before I came onto the project. He might have developed the script with Michael Mitnick. I don't know the exact story, but I believe Michael Mitnick had developed it for a little bit with Zaillian. And Scorsese was, like Thelma Schoonmaker, who's also here tonight, I'm very lucky to have with me,
where
One of the greatest editors in all of film history, who has collaborated on all of Scorsese's films since Raging Bull, among others.
True guardian angels. We were just reminiscing when I was at NYU. I had Thelma's chem in my tiny room that was about the size of a prison cell, and her chem took up half of the room. So my pillow would then, I'd roll over in bed, I'd land on the take-up reel. But anyway, she's been a force in my life, and Scorsese was it was some foresight from a very great agent that I have, who said, I'm going to go into business with Harvey, and you may want to have some kind of safety net in case, even though in case something goes wrong, and everything went wrong, right? And because Scorsese, if we couldn't figure out the final cut of it all, then that final cut would go to Scorsese. And because the studio collapsed, there was a chance that a version of the movie was going to be released that wasn't what I intended. That they were able to stop everything because of that clause. And then when Scorsese got the official final cut, he handed it to me and let me realize the film. So it's true generosity.
One more reason to admire Scorsese, and there are so many. Now, to go back to Michael, because I remember how in 2016 alone, I saw you in, let's see if I can remember all of them, Midnight Special, Loving, Elvis and Nixon, Complete Unknown. I did not see Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice, but I know it was your most popular film. And another of your movies is going to be released in late November, Knives Out, with Daniel Craig and Chris Evans. So I was curious, how do you choose roles? I know you turn down some, even though obviously you have chosen quite a few of these.
Well, it's changed, I mean, originally when I started, I was just, very grateful to get an offer at all. But nowadays, I just try and think: is there any reason for this film to exist? Does anybody actually need to see this? And if so, what can I contribute to it? Or could someone else do it and it'd be just fine? So if I can answer both of those questions, what would the answer be? Yes, yes. Then I proceed with it. But and I'm also very drawn to people. Like meeting with Alfonso kind of sealed the deal. Or a lot of jobs recently, even with The Shape of Water, I met with Guillermo, and I'm very drawn to seeing the passion, the vision, and the blood coursing through the veins of the other artist, and also to hear them talk and to just make sure that they're Copus mentis, Yes.
And in a film like this, how important were the costumes? Because it struck me, I've never seen you looking quite like in the current war. Between makeup and costumes, was that a significant part of your ability to?
Very much so, yeah. It's invaluable. I mean, yeah. I mean, when you show up at work in your street clothes, you're like, this isn't gonna happen. This is ridiculous. But then somebody comes in and helps you put all your clothes on, and then you get your stuff, and you're like, oh, I do kind of look like this.
And it always happened at the end of the night, if we decided to have dinner afterwards, and I'd see him in his street clothes. I was like, oh, he is much younger than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also you have a lot of close-ups in this film. Maybe it's because I was sitting in the first row, but the face of Westinghouse is very, very large, looms at me. So occasionally Edison as well. But you obviously were going for this, very grounded physicality of the character, whether in close-up or long shot. Now, you Alfonso, have also been working in television. In fact, I admit with embarrassment that I have not seen the episodes of Glee that you've done or American Horror Story, for which you also served as co-executive producer. But do you see your work in television as continuous with the feature films, or do you have to use a different kind of approach to the material?
No, I mean, for television, I'm really just doing the first episodes because it's very important to me to have a part in casting the film. As a director, you know, that relationship is sacred to me, and to be able to cast and rehearse and get the crew together. And of course, you work with your showrunners to get that. But that is so when I do TV now is to create that prototype. But I have to find something in it that I want to work through. Myself, it's not just shooting to shoot. You know, now I just finished something called Hunters that comes out in the winter with Al Pacino, which was a film. It's a 90-minute pilot, and you go into it because there was something in it that I think had to be made, and I wanted to be the person to make it. But I'm a film guy. I mean, all I want to do is make movies.
And I gather this is about a group of Nazi hunters in the 1970s,
yes,
based on a true story?
Not based
on a true story. IMDb is not always right. And is Jordan Peele the producer?
He's a producer as well, yeah.
And when will that be visible?
It looks like it's going to come out in February.
Oh, okay.
The 10 episodes, and we're finishing all of them now.
For
Amazon. Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to ask that we raise the lights more so than was the case before, because I don't know that any was raised. We will take a few questions from the audience, but we can't see you yet. So whoever is hearing me, please turn the lights up. I hope that happens. Yes, we are getting some light. Oh, now. And I see two hands, at least one waving from the back. There's a woman. Stand up. Go right ahead.
I thought that the addition of identifying characters was so helpful. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's not usually done in movies. How did that come to be? And the second thing is, could you talk about your next and current projects, both of you? Thank you.
The title sequence in David Trachtenberger's Year that was in the very first director's cut, and then we stopped using it. And it came right back 2 months ago. And it was a detail that I just loved because I wanted the film to be fast, to be just a step ahead and have the audience, and trusting the audience and never over-explaining, and which is a lesson I've learned from Schoonmaker and Scorsese, and trusting them, and a little bit of information would go a long way so that you can pay attention to the dialogue and follow the story, and also identify them. Certainly, like Wife and Partner was a great title because it was important to kind of explain quickly how important she was to him. Although you would see that earned through their performances, and there were so many characters coming in and out that I prefer a little title than exposition ADR, someone off camera saying that is so and so, and I am here to do this, which I can't stand that. And so a little title card could do it all for you and keep the momentum. And about future projects, I'm finally releasing this film into the world has been very emotional, and I'm just now that I've let it go, have I been able to focus on the next thing, which I'm not sure what it will be, but I'm close to something. I'm also incredibly superstitious.
I've been doing a lot of rowing lately because I think I'm going to go to Baton Rouge and make a movie about a rowing team, and I'm the coach. So I've been reading books about rowing.
Books?
Yeah, there's some great books about rowing. No joke. There's a book David Halberstam wrote called The
I know
Amateurs.
David Halbertson's Amateurs.
Oh man, that's a good book.
Actually.
I'm not kidding. But yeah, other than that, I don't know what's next.
Okay, gentleman right here, and then there was a hand over there.
Yes, my question's for Michael. You seem to really gravitate to some very complex characters. This one for sure, Westinghouse. Also loved you in Little Drummer Girl, which I thought was incredibly complex.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't hear that very often.
Just wondering, you know, how the complex character, how that is challenging for the actor, and what you do to really prepare for that kind of character.
Yeah, you know, well, all of these things, you know, whether it's play George Westinghouse or play a Mossad agent or play a rowing coach, you know, they start out being initially, you know, terrifying. This is like something I know absolutely nothing about. But that's the great thing about acting. The thing I guess I enjoyed the most about it is it's the best school I've ever been to. You know, when I went to school, real school, you know, you get books shoved in your face, like, do this, do that, write a paper, whatever. But this is an opportunity where it's like, you really need to learn about this. Because if you don't learn about this, you can't do it. You're gonna look like a fool and you're gonna let everybody down. So you really have to, and because of that pressure, it's actually very exciting. And it feels very purposeful, you know, to learn. You know, when I was doing Little Drummer Girl, you know, I was trying to get that accent, and it's a very hard accent to figure out, well, what would this guy's accent even be? He was originally from Eastern Europe, he was in the camps, now he's in Israel, he's in Mossad, you know. And I was listening to this novelist, Amos Oz, who passed away, and, you know, and every day I would go in, I would just listen to this man speak, one of the most brilliant men I'd ever heard talk. And if I enjoyed doing that job if for no other reason, because I got to learn about him. I would have never known about him otherwise. So, yeah. And in terms of how complicated things are, I mean, they're complicated everywhere. They're complicated when I'm on the set in front of a camera. They're complicated when I'm, you know, at Atlantic Avenue with my kids today, going to the Halloween store, trying to figure out which guy to buy to put on our porch to scare the trick-or-treaters. It's always complicated. You know, it's never not complicated.
There was a hand here. I think this is going to have to be the last one because they've got a full day tomorrow of stuff.
Bonzo, an extra, another adjective, haunting, like from the frame one, that was in the atmosphere the entire time. So the physical electricity to move things, but there was something up there going the entire time. And Mr. Shannon, it's a pleasure to see you. You didn't scare the daylight.
I don't know if you could hear in the back, but the first comment to Alfonso was that the word is haunting to describe the impression from the very beginning of the film straight through to the end. And to Michael Shannon, how much he enjoyed watching him, and he didn't scare him one bit this time, alluding to some of the previously slightly scary parts that displayed.
Oh, Bug, yeah.
Oh, Bug. He originated the role in Tracy Letts' Bug in the London production.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know. Yeah.
But my question is, I mean, the tension always between a biographical film and a film, where was the artistic license? How much of it must have had to be changed in order to get the movement and the rhythm and the understanding from us? I mean, like, did the last scene, did they actually meet in the Chinese?
Okay, so the question, how much artistic license, especially given that this is biographical, but it's a fiction film?
You have to take the War of the Currents. It can't be reduced to an hour and 45 minutes without some choices. As long as you know what the history is and how, and the actors know why we're making these decisions to get closer to the spirit of the time, the drama, and to convey the themes and why you're making the movie. Otherwise, you end up with a documentary. And for instance, Edison had two wives over the course of the War of the Currents, so I combined qualities of both into one, and I think her loss, and the way he kept trying to keep her alive throughout the film was more interesting and to get to the heart of the man, or close to the heart of the man, or my interpretation of Edison. We did, however, Michael Mitnick and I did go through the exercise of working on a draft that was incredibly long, that had all the characters. Southwick Brown, the human rights advocate, was actually a combination of Harold Brown and Alfred Southwick, and one was an engineer, one was a dentist. And what we did, and both took part in designing the electric chair and working with Edison, but that becomes an hour, right? So we did combine them, took one name, took Southwick and Brown, and that's the spirit, that's how we acknowledge both men. We did go through drafts where Mary dies, he meets his future wife, they get married, they move to the bigger house in West Orange, New Jersey, and it's another movie yet again. And so you have to make these choices, as long as you're constantly communicating with all your department heads and your actors of why these choices were being made, because otherwise it stops being a movie. And what I was going for were the themes that we started our conversation with, and that was what was most important.
Do you think Westinghouse and Edison ever met?
Well, they did. There is record of them meeting in his West Orange office. There was a thank you note that Westinghouse sent at one point. So that was enough to create a window of an opportunity to kind of conclude these ideas and maybe pose some questions.
Yeah. Well, I say thank goodness for artistic license, because without it, we would not have sumptuous fiction motion pictures based on real characters. This film opens on Friday, October 25th. The theaters are in your printed programs. I just want to say how grateful I am, because I do love this movie, to be joined tonight by Alfonso Gomez-Rejon and Michael Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you, man.